We've journeyed through the labyrinthine paths of morality, truth, and human nature. Now, as our philosophical expedition nears its close, we arrive at a profound, perhaps startling culmination, the Dionysian affirmation. For too long, humanity has sought solace, escape, or condemnation in the face of life's inherent suffering and chaos. We've called it the abyss, not just a symbol for meaninglessness, but the stark reality of loss, pain, and cosmic indifference. This void threatens to swallow our fragile constructs of order and purpose. Yet, what if, instead of recoiling in fear or seeking comforting illusions, we chose to turn and face it directly? What if we discovered, within that very chasm, a source of untamed power, a profound and exhilarating affirmation of existence itself, unburdened by external validation or divine comfort? Nietzsche invites us to gaze into the depths of existence, not with a spirit of resignation or despair, but with a fierce, unwavering acceptance. This isn't about ignoring pain, nor is it about pretending that sorrow doesn't sting. Rather, it is about understanding that suffering, struggle, and even destruction are not mere obstacles to be overcome, but fundamental, even necessary, ingredients in the rich tapestry of life. This acceptance blossoms into an even more radical stance, the capacity to laugh at tragedy. This isn't a crude or dismissive chuckle, but a resonant, almost sacred laughter. The laughter of one who has seen the worst, understood life's inherent meaninglessness, yet still chooses joy, creating beauty in the face of destruction. It is an overflowing spirit, an exuberance that embraces the full, terrifying spectrum of experience, from rapturous peaks to crushing valleys of despair. The Dionysian spirit, ancient and raw, understands that life, in its most vibrant expression, encompasses both creation and destruction, beauty and terror. To laugh in the face of tragedy is to affirm life's entirety, to declare that even its most horrific aspects do not diminish its worth, but rather intensify its magnificent, terrifying grandeur. It is to find a kind of intoxication, a glorious yes to everything that is, precisely because it is. Having embraced this profound acceptance, having found strength and even a radical joy in the face of life's inherent difficulties and fundamental uncertainties, we stand at the precipice of true, formidable freedom. The journey through beyond good and evil has systematically dismantled the old, inherited moral frameworks, ancient tables of values handed down for generations, often accepted blindly, without genuine inquiry. These systems, once seen as immutable truths, are now revealed as human constructs, products of specific historical and psychological needs. Now, the ultimate challenge and the ultimate liberation awaits. We are called not merely to critique or to dismantle, but, more profoundly, to create. We are invited, indeed compelled by our nature as self-overcoming beings, to become the authors of our own values, to inscribe unique, life-affirming laws onto the tablets of existence. This is the act of the sovereign individual, the true philosopher of the future, one who has stared into the abyss, acknowledged its vastness, and found within themselves not only the courage to stand firm, but the impetus to forge new ideals, to overcome themselves ceaselessly, elevating human possibility. This is not a chaotic abandonment of principles, but a profound, demanding responsibility to live authentically, to affirm life in its raw, unfiltered, often brutal glory, and to continually strive for a higher, more potent self. It is the joyous, deeply challenging burden of creating meaning where none is given, of becoming the conscious sculptor of one's own soul, shaping destiny amidst the swirling chaos and grandeur of existence. And so, our journey concludes not with a final answer, but with a powerful, exhilarating call to action, to live courageously, to love fate, to dance amidst the ruins, and to affirm, with every fiber of our being, the wild, beautiful, tragic, glorious symphony of life. Welcome back, listeners. In our journey through Beyond Good and Evil, we arrive at a concept that lies at the very heart of Nietzsche's philosophy, a profound insight into the fundamental engine of all existence, the will to power. For too long, we've been taught to see life through a lens of simple self-preservation, believing that the primary drive of every living thing is merely to survive. But what if this conventional wisdom misses the deeper, more dynamic truth? What if the will to survive is not the ultimate drive, but merely a secondary, weaker impulse, a consequence rather than the cause? Nietzsche challenges us to look beyond this passive notion. He argues that life, in its very essence, is not characterized by a struggle for mere existence, but by something far more active, far more ambitious. Consider for a moment. Does a plant merely survive when it reaches for the sun, pushing its roots deeper, spreading its branches wider? Does an animal simply preserve itself when it asserts dominance, claims territory, and strives to outcompete its rivals? No, Nietzsche insists. What we are witnessing here is not a hesitant desire to cling to life, but a vibrant, ceaseless striving for more intense life. This striving, this fundamental impulse, is what Nietzsche names the will to power. It is not about aggression in the simplistic sense, but about growth, overcoming, and expansion. Every living thing, every organism, from the simplest cell to the most complex human being, is engaged in a process of asserting its force, of incorporating, assimilating, and indeed, overpowering its environment. Life, in its purest form, is a continuous act of appropriation. It takes what it needs, transforms what it finds, and thereby increases its own strength and complexity. To live is to grow, and to grow is to overcome that which resists you, to make it part of yourself, or to push it aside. Think of it. The mighty tree does not merely survive the soil. It draws nutrients from it, transforming inert matter into living wood and leaf. The predator does not simply survive its prey. It overpowers it, integrating its energy into its own being, thereby enhancing its own vitality. This process, often labeled as exploitation or injustice from a conventional moral standpoint, is, for Nietzsche, a foundational and unavoidable characteristic of all organic life. It is not an ethical failing, but a biological necessity, a testament to life's inherent drive to assert itself and expand. Now, turn this lens inward. If this will to power is the fundamental impulse governing all life, then it resides within you as well. Do you feel a natural inclination to learn more, to develop new skills, to master a craft, to leave your mark on the world? Do you experience the joy of overcoming a personal challenge, of achieving a goal that once seemed out of reach? This isn't merely about getting by. It's about pushing past your current limits, expanding your capabilities, and asserting your unique force upon existence. To deny this drive within yourself, to suppress your ambition for growth and mastery, is to deny a core aspect of your own living nature. Nietzsche urges us to recognize and embrace this drive for growth and expansion, to see our struggles and aspirations not as selfish desires to be curbed, but as vital expressions of our own will to power. It is through this active striving, this continuous process of self-overcoming, that we truly flourish. It means taking responsibility for your own values, for creating your own meaning, and for shaping yourself into the person you are becoming. It is a call to not just survive, but to truly live, to exert your will, to grow beyond your current self, and to continually reevaluate and recreate your own existence in an ever more powerful way. So, as you reflect on this chapter, ask yourself, am I truly living in Nietzsche's sense? Am I allowing my innate will to power to express itself through growth, through overcoming, through the joyful expansion of my capabilities? Or am I merely seeking to survive, held back by conventional notions that restrict my true potential? The will to power is not a philosophy for the faint-hearted. It is an invitation to engage fully with the dynamic, asserting force of life within you, to become more, and to embrace the exhilarating journey of your own self-overcoming. As we delve deeper into the intricate landscape of human values, we encounter a fundamental divide, a schism at the very heart of morality itself. Nietzsche compels us to examine the origins of our conceptions of good and evil, revealing two distinct, opposing types of morality, that of the master and that of the slave. Imagine, for a moment, the perspective of the noble, the powerful, the self-sufficient. For these individuals, morality begins with themselves. They are the creators of value. They determine what is good based on their own elevated sense of self, their strength, their pride. The master morality is a celebration of life, a resounding yes to existence. It values qualities like courage, ambition, honor, and a profound respect for oneself. The noble person looks inward, affirms their own being, and from that overflowing strength, distinguishes what is contemptible: cowardice, meanness, petty deceit. There is no need for external validation. Their good is simply what they are, what they affirm. They act out of an abundance of power, with a sense of dignity that doesn't require an opposite to define itself. They see others not as inherently evil, but perhaps as bad in the sense of being inferior or common, yet still part of a natural hierarchy. This is a morality born of affirmation, of self-glorification, where the highest virtues are those that elevate the individual and their species. Now, let's turn to the other side of this profound ethical chasm: slave morality. This morality does not begin with a spontaneous affirmation, but rather with a reaction. It arises from the perspective of the oppressed, the suffering, the powerless. Unlike the master, the slave cannot simply affirm himself, for his life is often one of hardship and subjugation. Instead, his morality is born out of resentment, a deep-seated bitterness towards the powerful who cause his suffering. This reactive process is crucial. The slave defines good not as what he is, but as what the master is not. What is noble, strong, and dominating in the master's eyes becomes evil to the slave. Conversely, the qualities born of the slave's condition, patience, humility, compassion, obedience, are elevated to good. This inversion of values is the core of slave morality. It demonizes strength and pride, framing them as arrogance and cruelty. It seeks to comfort itself by declaring its own powerlessness of virtue. Central to understanding slave morality is the concept of raisonnement. This is more than just resentment. It's a festering, hidden revenge of the weak. It's the psychological mechanism by which the powerless create an imaginary world where their suffering is a sign of their moral superiority and the master's power is a sign of his depravity. Raisonnement is the poison of the soul, a creative act born of suppressed envy and hatred. Unable to act outwardly, it turns inward, reinterpreting reality to soothe its own pain and justify its own existence. It is a slow, subtle revenge, where the evil master is painted as deserving of eternal damnation and the good slave as deserving of salvation. This morality is not about creation, but about condemnation, not about self-affirmation, but about denying the values of the powerful and asserting a different, inverted set of values as universally true. Thus, we see that the very terms good and evil are not universal truths, but rather historically contingent creations arising from vastly different psychological and social conditions. One morality springs from overflowing power and self-affirmation, the other from reaction, suffering, and a profound, insidious raisonnement. This distinction, Nietzsche argues, is not merely academic, but foundational to understanding the very trajectory of human civilization and the values we hold dear. We now turn our attention to the intricate tapestry of peoples and fatherlands, a chapter where Nietzsche scrutinizes national characters and the spirit of his age. He embarks on a complex analysis, particularly focusing on his native Germany and the broader European landscape, questioning the very essence of national identity in a rapidly changing world. Nietzsche often wrestled with the very notion of a distinct German character, suggesting it was more a collection of disparate influences than a singular, unified identity. He observed a certain slowness and profound earnestness in the German spirit of his time, a tendency towards intellectual weightiness rather than agile subtlety. This, he felt, often contributed to a cultural provincialism, especially as he witnessed the rise of a narrow and aggressive German nationalism. He viewed this fervent patriotism, born from recent political unification and military successes, with deep skepticism. For him, it often felt like a superficial assertion of power, lacking genuine cultural depth, and manifesting as a kind of intellectual dullness and a resentful antagonism towards anything not purely German. He saw a disturbing trend where genuine intellect was sacrificed for a bombastic, heavy-handed national pride. Crucially, Nietzsche's critique extended powerfully to the burgeoning anti-Semitism of his era, which he found particularly distressing in Germany. He condemned it unequivocally, not merely as a moral failing, but as a vulgar and base expression of a weak, resentful spirit. He viewed anti-Semitism as a manifestation of ressentiment, a profound envy directed at a people perceived to possess a strength and intelligence that the anti-Semites themselves lacked. For Nietzsche, this prejudice was an attack on intellect, on sophistication, and on a vital, ancient European tradition, signaling a clear symptom of cultural decline and intellectual barrenness. He saw it as a desperate measure taken by those who lacked the capacity for greater understanding or genuine creativity. In sharp contrast to these prejudices, Nietzsche held a remarkable and often provocative view of the Jewish people. He recognized their profound historical impact, noting their immense resilience and extraordinary capacity for survival through millennia of persecution. He admired their intellectual acumen, their deep-seated will, and their singular ability to adapt and thrive in diverse circumstances, even shaping European morality through their ancient spiritual legacy that culminated in Christianity. He even suggested that the Jews had served as a kind of purifying or leavening agent within Europe, a powerful force that, through their distinct characteristics and long history, had contributed immeasurably to the depth and complexity of the European mind and spirit. He saw them as a people of extraordinary spirit, capable of greatness, and far removed from the crude caricatures presented by the anti-Semites of his day, asserting that Europe owed them a tremendous intellectual and spiritual debt. Out of this scrutiny of national identities and their limitations, Nietzsche introduces his profound ideal, the good European. This figure is not bound by the limitations of a single nation or the prejudices of narrow patriotism. Indeed, they actively transcend them. The good European is an individual who embraces a broader, more expansive understanding of culture, intellect, and human potential, recognizing the shared destiny of the continent. They possess a deep, cultivated intellect, capable of appreciating the diverse strands of European civilization, seeing themselves as heirs to a vast, rich heritage rather than confined to one corner of the continent by accident of birth. This good European looks beyond the fleeting political squabbles, the nationalistic fervor, and the tribal instincts that divide peoples. They recognize the deeper, underlying currents of European thought and potential, understanding that true greatness lies in synthesis and overcoming. They are aristocratic in spirit, not by birthright, but by virtue of their independent perspective, their intellectual courage to stand apart from the herd, and their capacity to envision a future for Europe that is greater than the sum of its individual parts. They embody a future-oriented ideal, a new kind of human being forged from the best of all European traditions, ready to move beyond good and evil and beyond mere national identity, toward a higher, more unified human culture that understands its shared intellectual and spiritual legacy. As we turn our gaze inward, reflecting on the virtues of our modern age, a peculiar and perhaps unsettling truth emerges. For us, the so-called free spirits, Our most distinctive and perhaps our last remaining virtue is not found in the ancient ideals passed down through generations, nor in the comforting pieties of tradition. Instead, it is honesty, or more precisely, intellectual probity. This demanding quality, we find, is the youngest of our virtues, a trait that has only recently blossomed as a counterpoint to centuries of inherited dogmas. It is a profound commitment to facing truth squarely, even when it's deeply uncomfortable, even when it threatens to shatter our most cherished illusions and long-held beliefs. This honesty means rigorously refusing to lie to ourselves, refusing to take refuge in convenient fictions or comforting myths. It demands a perpetual, relentless self-examination, a willingness to question everything and everyone, and crucially, a readiness to acknowledge our own inherent ignorance. It is far from an easy path, yet it is the solitary path of genuine intellectual integrity, a hard-won trait in a world still often prone to widespread self-deception. This virtue, once fully embraced, inexorably leads us to question everything, including our own comfortable assumptions about what constitutes good, preparing the ground for deeper insights. This brings us to a concept that might seem profoundly counterintuitive in our modern world: the deliberate cultivation of suffering. In an age striving to eradicate all forms of pain, to seek a life devoid of hardship, we must pause and consider: what if suffering is not merely an obstacle to be overcome, but a crucial crucible for the human soul? It is through the discipline of great suffering, and perhaps only through it, that humanity has truly enhanced itself, gaining depth, wisdom, and resilience. A soul that has not known profound anguish remains shallow, lacking the rich textures and nuanced understanding forged in the fires of adversity. We are speaking here of a suffering that is embraced, not merely endured, a suffering that becomes a tool for profound self-overcoming and self-knowledge. It is a necessary catalyst for transformation, pushing us beyond our superficial selves towards a deeper, more profound existence, one capable of true greatness. Indeed, this profound relationship between suffering and depth leads directly to the nature of high culture and spiritual tension. True greatness, whether in art, philosophy, or any human endeavor, does not blossom in an environment of serene comfort and unchallenged harmony. On the contrary, it requires immense pressure, friction, and the deliberate cultivation of internal and external conflicts. Think of the greatest achievements of human civilization. Were they not born from societies or individuals experiencing profound struggles, intense longings, and the clash of opposing values? High culture thrives on this very tension, this pathos of distance, this striving to overcome, to distinguish oneself. It is the spiritualization of our deepest passions, a relentless drive to transform raw human experience into something elevated and enduring. The soul, stretched to its limits by suffering and striving, develops a depth and complexity that makes true cultural creation possible. Without this crucible of tension, we risk a descent into comfortable mediocrity, a superficial existence devoid of the profound resonance that defines the highest forms of human expression. To deny suffering, then, is to deny the very conditions that make nobility and high culture possible. It is to sacrifice the potential for greatness on the altar of mere comfort. Where Nietzsche draws a crucial line between those who merely catalog knowledge and those who create values. This chapter asks us to distinguish the scholar from the true philosopher, the architects of humanity's future. Consider first the objective man, or modern scholar. This individual strives for detachment, aiming to be a pure mirror of reality, reflecting existing facts. They suppress personal preferences, passions, and their will, believing impartiality reveals truth. They meticulously collect and present information. Yet, Nietzsche critiques this very objectivity. In becoming a mirror, the objective man surrenders the will to create, to command, to legislate new values. They are invaluable tools, yes, but not masters. They serve knowledge, lacking the drive to wield it for a grander purpose, to forge new meaning. Their role is passive, reacting to the world rather than shaping it. Next, consider the modern skeptic. This individual questions every foundation, finding certainty in little. While critical spirit is vital, Nietzsche argues pervasive skepticism, when an end in itself, causes paralysis. The skeptic, like the objective man, lacks the strong will to affirm, to build, to establish new values. They dismantle beliefs, but offer no new structure. They merely wait for truth, rather than boldly forging new conditions for it. This hesitancy, this refusal to commit, deprives them of the commanding drive to set new directions. This brings us to Nietzsche's true philosopher. This figure stands in stark contrast. No mere observer, they are a commander and a legislator. They don't discover values, they create them. They don't just understand the world, they interpret and reshape it, generating new possibilities. Possessed of an overflowing will, a powerful drive, they impose their vision upon reality. They are the highest artists, sculptors of humanity's future, daring to say, "Thus it shall be." Their philosophy isn't an explanation. It's a declaration of intent, a blueprint for new living. For these true philosophers, knowledge holds a different purpose. It isn't an ultimate goal. Instead, knowledge is a tool, a potent instrument in their creative arsenal. They gather facts, analyze systems, and understand the world's workings, but always with a clear objective, to master and employ this information in their grand project of value creation. Knowledge provides the raw materials and leverage to build new worlds. They're defined not by what they know, but by what they boldly do with that knowledge. They do not serve knowledge. Knowledge serves them. Thus, Nietzsche draws a profound line. On one side, scholars, objective men, skeptics, valuable functionaries who catalog and critique what exists. On the other, true philosophers, commanders, legislators, audacious creators of new values. He challenges us, which truly leads, which advances human potential, mere accumulation, or the courageous act of creation, the natural history of morals. Here, we embark on a profound journey, shifting our gaze from morality as a sacred, unchangeable truth to understanding it as a deeply human, historical construct, a tool, perhaps, for control and survival. Let us begin by questioning the very nature of what we call good and evil. Rather than eternal decrees from above, Nietzsche invites us to see these concepts as products of evolution, emerging from the practical needs of communities. He introduces us to the powerful idea of herd morality. Imagine a vast plain, and within it, a herd of creatures. Their primary concern is collective survival. This herd morality is the framework of values designed to protect the average, to foster obedience, conformity, and a comforting sense of safety for the group. It praises qualities like sympathy, humility, and self-sacrifice, virtues that ensure the smooth functioning and preservation of the collective. The individual, in this scheme, is often asked to diminish their unique spark for the greater good of the many. But what drives the formation of such a system? Nietzsche contends that fear, primal and pervasive, is the very mother of morality. It's the fear of chaos, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the powerful individual who might disrupt the comfortable predictability of the group. Society, in its earliest forms, sought to establish order, to mitigate risks, and to create a predictable environment where the weaker elements could thrive. Morality, then, becomes a sophisticated mechanism to manage these anxieties, defining what is good as what is safe and stable for the community, and branding anything that threatens this stability as evil or dangerous. It's a collective defense mechanism, forged in the crucible of fear. This brings us to a crucial tension, the conflict between the herd and the exceptional individual. Society, guided by its fear-born morality, instinctively views the strong, independent, or uniquely gifted person with suspicion. Such an individual, brimming with original thoughts, unconventional desires, or an extraordinary will, inherently challenges the established norms and the comfortable mediocrity of the collective. They are perceived not as a potential asset, but as a dangerous outlier, a threat to the equilibrium. The moral codes of the herd are, in part, a means to neutralize this perceived danger. Society employs various strategies to tame these dangerous individuals, through shame, guilt, social exclusion, or by subtly encouraging them to conform, to make themselves smaller, to serve the collective rather than pursue their own path. They are often labeled immoral or selfish precisely because their existence questions the prevailing values, demanding a space beyond the herd's safe boundaries. Thus, we see morality not as a divine blueprint for human behavior, but as a deeply human invention, a historical tool shaped by the instincts of self-preservation, fear, and the desire for control. It is a system primarily designed to ensure the survival and stability of the many, often at the cost of the exceptional few, subtly shaping our understanding of good and evil to serve its own ends. Welcome back to our journey through Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. In this chapter, we pivot to a more direct, rapid-fire exploration of human behavior, as seen through Nietzsche's sharp, often challenging epigrams. He forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves, our relationships, and the deep, often hidden forces that truly drive us. We begin by delving into the very bedrock of Nietzsche's psychology, the overwhelming power of instinct. For Nietzsche, our conscious thoughts, our carefully constructed reasons, are often merely the surface ripples of far deeper, more primal currents. He contends that our most profound decisions, our deepest beliefs, and even our moral judgments often spring from unconscious, inherited instincts, rather than pure, objective reason. We tell ourselves stories of rational choice, but beneath it all, an ancient will to power, a drive for growth and mastery, guides our every step. This instinctive force, this inherent predisposition, is a powerful lens through which he examines love, friendship, and the dynamics between genders. Let's turn first to his provocative observations on love. Nietzsche rarely romanticizes it. Instead, he often dissects love as a powerful, sometimes perilous, interplay of wills. He suggests that what we call love can often be a complex entanglement of a desire to possess, to idealize, or even to control. It's not always the pure, selfless emotion we imagine, but rather a profound delusion, a temporary blindness that allows us to project our highest ideals onto another. In this intense projection, we become vulnerable, entangled in the other person's existence, sometimes to our own detriment. He challenges us to look beyond the sentimentality and consider the deeper, more animalistic drives at play. The hunger for belonging, for affirmation, or for the continuation of one's own will through another. Moving to perhaps his most controversial observations, Nietzsche offers a stark, often unflattering portrait of women and the dynamics of gender. He posits that men and women fundamentally approach life, truth, and relationships from different, often opposing perspectives. For Nietzsche, women are often associated with appearance, illusion, and a certain kind of artifice. He suggests that their strength lies in their ability to charm, to adorn, and to create beautiful surfaces, and that for many, their deepest desire is love, and often an underlying will to revenge. He goes so far as to describe woman as a profound, complex problem for the thinking man, a being whose truth might lie in vanity, whose greatest art is deception. These are challenging ideas, certainly, and it's essential to understand them within the context of his broader critique of conventional morality and his historical perspective on gender roles, rather than as universal, prescriptive truths. He is aiming to dismantle our comfortable assumptions, even if the tools he uses are blunt and difficult for modern ears. Finally, we consider his views on friendship. Unlike his often cynical take on love, Nietzsche values friendship as a demanding, yet potentially enriching relationship. True friendship, for him, isn't about mere companionship or mutual comfort. It is a bond between individuals who challenge each other, who spur one another on towards greater self-overcoming. A true friend is one who helps you grow, who pushes you beyond your current limitations, even if it means discomfort or confrontation. It's a relationship of shared ambition, where both individuals strive to realize their highest potential, using the friendship as a crucible for personal development. Throughout these rapid insights, Nietzsche constantly demands an unsparing honesty from us. He insists that we look beyond the polite fictions of society and the comforting illusions we tell ourselves to confront the raw, instinctual forces that truly shape human behavior. This chapter, with its collection of sharp observations, serves as a powerful reminder that beneath our carefully constructed civilization, powerful, ancient instincts continue to reign, dictating much of what we think, feel, and do. We are left to ponder how much of our own lives are truly our own conscious choice, and how much is simply the unfolding of an instinctual drama. We now turn our gaze to the enigmatic realm of the religious mood, a domain that has profoundly shaped human history and deeply influenced our understanding of ourselves. It is a landscape of profound conviction and sacrifice, but also one deeply intertwined with curious and often unsettling psychological forces. To truly grasp the essence of religious devotion, we must venture beyond its surface piety and delve into the often challenging depths of its origins. Consider, if you will, the long, winding ladder of religious cruelty, a journey etched deep within the annals of faith and human psychology. Humanity's earliest sacrifices were often brutally physical, the offering of fellow humans, then perhaps the most cherished firstborn. But this was merely the rudimentary beginning of a far more profound and insidious cruelty. As religious consciousness evolved, the nature of sacrifice became increasingly refined, spiritualized, and turned inward. People began to sacrifice their strongest instincts, their most vibrant natural inclinations, their very will to thrive and assert themselves. It became about relentless self-denial, the systematic self-torture of the soul, the suppression of life-affirming impulses, all rationalized in the name of a higher, often abstract and unreachable, ideal. This wasn't merely a physical act, but a profound psychological one, a sustained act of cruelty against one's own nature. This path of relentless self-overcoming, this deliberate self-impoverishment, ultimately culminates in the supreme paradox, the sacrifice of even one's own God, replacing traditional faith with a radical yearning for absolute truth, a truth pursued even into the abyss of nothingness, no matter how bleak or devoid of meaning it might appear. This historical progression of sacrifice illuminates a pivotal and profoundly influential revaluation of values, a re-encoding of humanity's moral language. What once seemed despicable or weak, things like pity, humility, poverty, and submission, were slowly but systematically rebranded and elevated to the revered status of virtues. Observe this profound inversion. Strength, pride, the robust affirmation of life, and the joyful exercise of power, which were once celebrated as noble and good, became tainted with the stigma of sin. Conversely, weakness, suffering, self-denial, and the suppression of natural drives, once considered unfortunate or even contemptible, were now championed as quintessential signs of holiness and moral excellence. This was no accidental shift in perception. It was a deliberate, ingenious, and deeply psychological act, a profound re-engineering of the moral compass. It represented, in many ways, the creative revenge of the disadvantaged, a masterful intellectual ploy by those who felt overlooked or oppressed, subtly turning the very definition of good against those who appeared strong and self-sufficient, thereby poisoning the wellsprings of natural human instincts. And within this dramatically reimagined moral landscape emerges the enduring figure of the saint, a profound paradox. an enigmatic riddle that has captivated and bewildered thinkers for millennia. What is it about these individuals, seemingly so utterly detached from earthly desires, so impervious to conventional lures, that bestows upon them such immense power and magnetic fascination? Nietzsche urges us to look far beyond the simplistic and often sentimental notions of goodness typically ascribed to them. Is the saints' asceticism, their radical apparent denial of life, truly a sign of inherent weakness, a flight from reality? Or is it, perhaps, the most formidable manifestation of an excess of power, a formidable will so potent that it is redirected inward, mastering the self with an almost terrifying absolute intensity? Their profound self-denial, their unwavering ability to reject the conventional comforts and temptations of the world, speaks not of an absence of will, but rather of a will so extraordinarily potent that it can turn against its own natural impulses, forging an entirely new, often counterintuitive, set of values for humanity. They are masters of a very particular, often brutal, form of self-overcoming. Yet, we are compelled to rigorously question the true nature of their knowledge, their truth, and their holiness. Is it a genuine, divine insight, or a highly sophisticated form of self-deception, perhaps even the sublime sublimation of a deeper, more refined psychological pathology, an instinct of profound disgust with the world? The saint, through their very existence, wields immense psychological influence, not necessarily through overt actions or pronouncements, but by embodying an utterly alternative path, fundamentally challenging the established moral order simply by existing as they do. They represent a fundamental, unsettling question mark against humanity's most accepted truths, demonstrating that even in apparent renunciation, in the most extreme forms of self-denial, there lies a profound, often unsettling, and ultimately powerful expression of the will to power. Here, Friedrich Nietzsche introduces us to the singular and often lonely world of the free spirit, a type of individual forged in the crucible of independence. He describes the very constitution required to break free from societal norms and embrace a profound, sometimes terrifying, solitude. This spirit is a distinct and rare being, venturing beyond the comfort zones of established thought and collective morality. To truly free oneself, Nietzsche argues, is to embark on a path fraught with pain and danger. Independence is not a comfortable armchair. It is a harsh wilderness. To stand alone, to think for oneself, to question everything society holds sacred, this demands an immense personal cost. It means enduring the acute pain of isolation, the sting of being misunderstood, and often silent ostracism. The free spirit must be prepared for this journey into an intellectual and emotional desert, where the air is thin, and their only companions are their own thoughts and a relentless pursuit of truth. They embrace discomfort, recognizing that true liberation often feels like an unsettling detachment, a cold and bracing solitude, rather than a warm embrace. This is the struggle of those strong enough to bear their own weight, forging their own values away from well-trodden paths. But let us be clear, the free spirit is not the common free thinker. Nietzsche carefully distinguishes between these. Many who claim intellectual independence merely discard old chains only to eagerly fasten themselves to new ones. They may reject traditional dogmas, but then unthinkingly adopt fashionable beliefs in science, progress, or equality as new, unquestionable truths. These individuals, Nietzsche observes, are still bound by group opinions, still craving acceptance and the security of a collective identity, albeit a different one. They exchange one form of herd mentality for another, believing themselves free because their new herd is considered enlightened. The true free spirit, by contrast, is a radical skeptic of all dogmas, including seemingly progressive ones. Their restless, critical intellect questions every foundation, every proclaimed truth, even their own. They are forever in motion, never settling, never fully belonging, always seeking what lies beyond. Their freedom is not just intellectual rebellion, but a fundamental orientation towards perpetual self-overcoming, an aversion to being captured by any fixed perspective. Such a profoundly independent and critical spirit, dwelling in such depths, cannot always reveal its true nature. Indeed, the free spirit often finds it necessary to wear masks, to conceal their most profound insights and genuine solitude from the superficial gaze of society. This is not deceit, but self-preservation, a practical necessity for survival and continued growth. To lay bare one's deepest convictions or radical questioning to those unprepared or unwilling to understand would be futile and dangerous. It risks misunderstanding, ridicule, or worse, the dilution and trivialization of their precious insights. The mask serves as a shield, protecting their inner sanctuary, their unique perspective, allowing them to move through the world observing, learning, and gathering strength without being compromised by popular opinion or demands of conformity. It is a subtle art of reserve, a wisdom that recognizes not all truths are for all ears, and that true depth must often remain hidden to protect its integrity. Thus, the free spirit masters the dance of appearances, safeguarding their precious independence behind a carefully constructed facade. This odyssey of the free spirit, then, is one defined by immense courage, profound isolation, and a relentless, unyielding pursuit of self-overcoming, a journey that forever sets them apart, beyond good and evil, forging their own path in the vast expanse of their unique being. In our last chapter, we challenged the very foundations of morality and truth. Now, we turn our gaze inward to question something even more fundamental, the nature of the self. We begin by dissecting one of philosophy's most celebrated phrases, I think. It sounds so simple, so self-evident, doesn't it? A foundational certainty, famously posited by Descartes as the bedrock of all knowledge. But Nietzsche urges us to pause, to look closer, to see the profound assumptions hidden within those two deceptively straightforward words. When we say, I think, we instinctively assume several things. First, that there is a distinct, unified subject that performs the act of thinking. Second, that thinking is an action, a doing, an activity initiated by this, yet Nietzsche provocatively asks, how do we know this? Where is the evidence, beyond our linguistic habits, that thinking isn't simply happening, much like a fever happens or a plant grows? We perceive a thought, and immediately, grammatically, we impose an I upon it, as if to attribute agency. But is the I truly the cause, or merely an effect, a label we affix after the fact? Consider the possibility that the I is not a stable, enduring entity, but rather a convenient fiction, a product of our grammar. The phrase, I think, already presupposes that there's an I that knows what thinking is, and that knows it is the one doing the thinking. This is a leap of faith, an immediate, unexamined judgment, baked right into our language. We are, in essence, assuming the very thing we should be questioning. What if thinking is not an act performed by an I, but rather a complex process in which the I itself is merely a fleeting symptom or a convenient summary? This unraveling of the I think then leads us to a much broader reevaluation of what we understand as the soul. For centuries, the soul has been conceived as something atomic, indivisible, a simple, enduring spiritual substance, perhaps immortal, perhaps the core of our being. This atomic theory of the soul, much like the atomic theory of the physical world, sought a fundamental, irreducible unit. But Nietzsche vehemently rejects this notion. He proposes a radically different view. The soul is not an atom, but a complex, dynamic structure, a kind of social structure composed of many, often conflicting drives and effects. Imagine your inner world not as a singular, unified entity, but as a vibrant, tumultuous community. Within this community reside countless drives, instincts, passions, and effects, all vying for dominance, negotiating for expression, constantly in motion. There are impulses pulling you in one direction, while others tug you in another. Some drives are strong and assertive. Others are subtle and subconscious. This isn't a peaceful democracy. It's a hierarchy, a battlefield, a constantly shifting power dynamic where different souls, or subpersonalities, are always at play. What we call the soul or the self is merely the fleeting result of this ongoing negotiation, this shifting balance of power among our internal forces. It's the current state of affairs within this intricate inner polity. There isn't one master conductor. Rather, there's a continuous interplay, a government formed by the most dominant or strategically aligned drives at any given moment. Thus, the idea of a simple, indivisible soul is shattered, replaced by a recognition of a rich, multifaceted inner world, a multitude of souls within each of us. But how did we come to believe in this illusion of a unified, atomic self in the first place? Nietzsche points a finger squarely at one of our most fundamental tools: language. Language, that powerful instrument of thought and communication, paradoxically also becomes a cage, trapping us in certain ways of understanding the world and ourselves. The structure of our grammar, particularly the subject-verb-object formulation, deeply ingrained in Indo-European languages, is a prime example of this confinement. Every action, every happening demands an actor. When we say the lightning flashes, our grammar insists on a lightning that does the flashing, rather than simply acknowledging the phenomenon of flashing. It forces us to posit a subject where perhaps only an event exists. This grammatical habit extends profoundly to our understanding of the self, because our language demands a subject for every predicate, an I for every think, feel, or act. We are subtly, relentlessly conditioned to believe in a distinct, coherent I that initiates all these actions. We construct an I to be the agent, the doer, the consistent underlying entity responsible for our thoughts and feelings. It's a linguistic necessity that becomes a metaphysical conviction. Nietzsche suggests that this deeply rooted grammatical structure prevents us from truly seeing the fluid, dynamic, and fragmented nature of our inner experience. It creates the illusion of a solid, unified self that stands behind all our experiences, rather than recognizing that the self is itself an emergent property, a constantly reforming aggregate of drives, influences, and momentary conditions. We are not a static, I-performing actions. We are a complex interplay of forces, which our language then simplifies and solidifies into a grammatical subject, thereby reinforcing the fiction of the atomic soul. So the cherished I, that seemingly undeniable core of our being, is, in Nietzsche's view, largely a linguistic construct. It's a convenient simplification, a necessary grammatical invention that, while practical for communication, deeply distorts our understanding of consciousness and selfhood. To truly understand ourselves, we must learn to see beyond the dictates of our own grammar and recognize the intricate, multifaceted dance of drives and effects that truly constitutes what we call the soul. Have you ever stopped to question the very impulse that drives us to seek truth, to pursue knowledge, to uncover what is real? Most of us assume this will to truth is a noble, unquestionable virtue, a pure, innocent desire. But what if this desire itself is merely another form of prejudice, a deeply ingrained moral imperative that we've never truly examined? Nietzsche invites us to step back and look at the grand parade of philosophers throughout history. These towering figures, from Plato to Kant, claim to be discovering objective realities, unearthing universal principles that govern existence. Yet, look closer, and you might find something else entirely. Nietzsche suggests that every great philosophy is less a discovery of impartial truth and more a deeply personal confession, an unwitting autobiography of its creator's own moral compass and deepest instincts. Consider a philosopher who champions reason above all else, advocating for a world built on logic and detached analysis. Isn't it possible that this philosopher, perhaps unconsciously, values order and control because those are the very qualities that provide them with comfort and security in their own inner world? What if their truth is simply their preferred way of seeing the world, elevated to the status of a universal law? Philosophers, in their earnest quest for truth, often end up doing something quite different. They attempt to justify their own prejudices, their own moral and personal preferences, by dressing them up in the guise of objective necessity. They start with a desired conclusion, perhaps a belief in the inherent goodness of humanity or the ultimate triumph of reason. And then they work backward, constructing elaborate logical frameworks to support it. They seek to present their personal dogmas as if they were divine revelations, universally binding for all. The will to truth, therefore, might not be as pure as it pretends. It could be inextricably linked to deeper, more primal instincts. The instinct for self-preservation, the desire to impose one's values on others, or even a hidden moral drive disguised as intellectual rigor. When a philosopher claims to have found the ultimate answer, they are often, in Nietzsche's view, expressing a profound need within themselves, rather than merely reflecting an external reality. Their intellect becomes a tool, an advocate for their deepest inclinations. Think of it this way. Behind every great philosophical system, there's a human being with specific beliefs, fears, hopes, and values, all shaped by their unique experiences. And these deeply personal elements inevitably seep into their grand theories about the universe. What they consider true often aligns perfectly with what they consider good or valuable for their own way of life. So, this brings us to a crucial challenge: to look beyond the surface of philosophical arguments and discern the hidden motives, the underlying prejudices, the unspoken moral judgments that often fuel the search for truth. And this challenge extends not just to the ancient masters, but to ourselves. What are the hidden dogmas in your own beliefs? What are the unexamined assumptions, the deeply ingrained values that you accept as self-evident truths without ever truly questioning their origins or their validity? Do you, too, sometimes elevate your personal preferences to the status of universal laws? Perhaps you believe that equality is the highest good, or that individual freedom is paramount, or that progress is always benevolent. These are powerful beliefs, certainly, but Nietzsche compels us to ask, what instincts or moral leanings might be driving your conviction that these are the ultimate, unquestionable truths? This isn't about dismissing truth entirely. Rather, it's an invitation to cultivate a profound skepticism, not just of others' pronouncements, but of our own. To understand that the very impulse to define, categorize, and declare something true often springs from a place far more complex and far less objective than we care to admit. It asks us to recognize the profoundly human, all too human element at the heart of even our most rigorous intellectual pursuits. We must be willing to unearth the unconscious intentions, the secret drives, the personal struggles that hide beneath the grand pronouncements of philosophy. Because until we do, we risk mistaking a personal confession for universal truth and unknowingly perpetuating the prejudices of philosophers, both past and present, and perhaps even our own. Welcome. Before we embark on this extraordinary journey through Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, let's cast aside any preconceived notions of a dusty academic delivering dry pronouncements. Nietzsche was no such scholar. Instead, picture a force, an intellectual explosion, a mind that consciously declared itself dynamite against the very foundations of traditional thought. He wasn't interested in gentle persuasion or polite discourse. His mission was to blast away the conventional wisdom, the cherished moralities, and the assumed truths that had long defined Western civilization. He challenged everything, from our concepts of good and evil, to the nature of truth itself, to the very purpose of human striving, with a radical intensity that remains as potent and unsettling today as it was more than a century ago. This book is not a comforting fireside chat. It is an encounter with a relentless intellect determined to uncover the hidden motives and unspoken assumptions behind our most deeply held beliefs. Nietzsche sought to unmask, to question, and to reevaluate all values, wielding his pen like a hammer against idols, aiming to clear away the debris of centuries of ingrained philosophy and pave the way for a new understanding of human potential and existence. His work is a call to intellectual courage, urging us to look beyond superficial appearances and confront the profound complexities of life without illusions. Navigating these intellectual landscapes can be formidable. Nietzsche's ideas are like high mountains, breathtaking in their scope, exhilarating in their views, yet also steep, treacherous, and at times profoundly disorienting. They demand effort, focus, and a willingness to venture off well-trodden paths. That's where I, your narrator, come in. My role is not to soften Nietzsche's blows or to dilute his powerful insights, but rather to serve as your seasoned guide on this challenging ascent. Think of me as a fellow climber, illuminating the intricate paths, pointing out the breathtaking vistas of insight, and helping you traverse the more difficult philosophical terrain with greater confidence. We'll simplify complex sentences without omitting their vital essence, ensuring that the core ideas remain intact while becoming more accessible. This is about taking a humanized approach to Nietzsche, making his profound, often demanding, prose more relatable and understandable, bridging the gap between his formidable genius and your intellectual journey. My aim is to help you engage directly with his revolutionary thought without getting lost in its intricate depths, to make his often impassioned voice resonate clearly, and to grasp the nuanced implications of his arguments as if he were speaking directly to you, making his challenging philosophy not just comprehensible, but genuinely an experience. Now, a crucial word of caution. As we prepare to delve into this profound work, it's imperative to understand that Nietzsche is not for the faint of heart, nor for those easily offended. His philosophy is inherently provocative, designed to unsettle and provoke thought rather than confirm. It challenges conventional morality, questions deeply ingrained societal norms, and critiques established religious and philosophical systems with an unflinching gaze, exposing what he perceived as their underlying weaknesses and hypocrisies. He delves into uncomfortable truths about human nature, power dynamics, the illusions we construct to make sense of our world, and the true origins of our values. Expect to have your most cherished assumptions scrutinized, your comfortable certainties disturbed, and perhaps even your worldview fundamentally shaken. This is not a text designed to offer solace or confirmation bias. It is an intellectual gauntlet, an invitation to rigorous self-examination and a fearless reevaluation of everything you thought you knew. To fully engage with beyond good and evil, you will need an open mind, a profound willingness to confront uncomfortable ideas head-on, and the intellectual courage to grapple with concepts that may very well challenge your fundamental understanding of what it means to be good, to be true, to be moral, and indeed, to be human. Be prepared to think, to question deeply, to perhaps feel challenged, and ultimately, to be transformed by a mind that refused to compromise. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. These are the chilling, resonant words of Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher who dared to peer into the deepest recesses of human morality and question every assumption he found there. For most of us, since our earliest days, we are meticulously taught to trust our moral compass, to instinctively differentiate between what is inherently right and what is undeniably wrong. It's a bedrock belief, an almost sacred internal guide, providing a deep sense of comfort and stability in a chaotic world. But what if this cherished compass, this seemingly infallible arbiter of truth, is in fact nothing more than a carefully constructed artifice? What if it serves not as a beacon of freedom, but as a subtle, yet immensely powerful, invisible cage, imperceptibly limiting your thoughts, shaping your judgments, and dictating your actions within boundaries you never consciously chose or even acknowledged. Nietzsche, with audacious courage, dared to ask this profoundly dangerous question. He ventured to suggest that our most venerated virtues, our most deeply held convictions regarding goodness and evil, might not be immutable, universal truths handed down from on high. Instead, he proposed they could be meticulously crafted fictions, ingenious social constructs serving hidden purposes, fulfilling agendas that we, the unwitting participants, are often entirely unaware of. Pause for a moment and truly consider the very foundations of your own understanding of morality. When you deem something good or evil, where do these powerful classifications originate within you? Were they born from an objective, timeless truth, discovered through pure reason or divine revelation? Or were they carefully, almost subliminally, whispered into your consciousness by the dominant voices of society, by the relentless currents of tradition, by revered figures of authority, all shaping your fundamental perspective long before you ever develop the capacity to critically question their origins or their validity? What if the very fabric of your moral universe is a tapestry woven by hands long dead, for reasons you can scarcely fathom? In the challenging, electrifying pages of Beyond Good and Evil, Friedrich Nietzsche embarks on an exhilarating and profoundly radical intellectual journey. He invites us to join him in pulling back the curtain on the grand, often comforting illusions that have underpinned Western thought for millennia. He doesn't merely critique these structures. He embarks on an intellectual excavation. He meticulously unearths the hidden, often surprising origins of our most fundamental values, revealing precisely how concepts like good and evil came to acquire their current meanings, and how these very meanings have been ingeniously twisted, strategically reinterpreted, and even entirely inverted over the vast expanse of centuries. This promises to be anything but a comfortable listen. It is instead an urgent invitation to a profound and necessary discomfort, a bracing challenge to systematically re-examine every single thing you thought you knew, every inherent truth you held dear. For the next 60 minutes, we will not simply engage in a detached exploration of abstract philosophy. No, our endeavor will be far more immersive. We will undertake an intellectual archaeological dig, delving deep into the very bedrock of human morality, peeling back layers of cultural conditioning and historical sediment. We will confront the dangerous, unsettling question head-on. What if our most sacred cows, the untouchable beliefs we guard so fiercely, are in fact nothing more than idols fashioned from fragile clay? What if our relentless, unquestioning pursuit of goodness, as defined by others, has inadvertently led us profoundly astray, blinding us to more fundamental, often uncomfortable, truths about power, about the raw human will, and about the authentic, unvarnished human condition itself? Prepare yourself, then, to question not just the convenient answers, but the very questions that have been posed to you throughout your life. Prepare to courageously face the profound abyss that lies hidden within your own moral framework. Because to truly begin to comprehend what lies beyond good and evil, to truly glimpse a world unburdened by conventional morality, you must first be willing to confront and dismantle the intricate, often deceptive, architecture of your own ingrained conscience. This singular journey promises to systematically dismantle the most comfortable, yet most confining, lies that permeate modern society, ultimately leaving you with a radically fresh, often unsettling, but undeniably liberating perspective. A perspective that empowers you to think and perhaps to live with a new kind of freedom.